Property versus real estate. What makes them different? Have you ever noticed how different the properties are? Just an average family out in America seems to have this mansion, whereas the average family here will have a 2-bed terrace property all crammed in. And there's a lot of things that actually impact that, starting with population density. Population density is how many people per capita this is, how many people per kilometre actually live in the UK versus the US. In the UK, it's 15th in terms of the most dense, with almost 67 million people and 242,000 square kilometres being available in the UK, meaning around 280 people per kilometre. Whereas in America, which is 185th on the list, there's over 372 million people that live there, with over 9.6 million square kilometres available to them, with just 34 people per square kilometre. A dramatic difference. Why is that important? Well, obviously, when you've got more people for the available space, what that means is the properties need to be more restricted in terms of how close together they are, and of course, how big the property's going to be. The next thing we need to look at is affordability. A lot of people look at a property price in isolation and think it means a lot. One thing we need to look at is currency, because £1,000,000 yen is very different to £1,000,000 is very different to $1,000,000. But the real thing we need to look at is the property price versus the average salary. So the average salary in the UK is quite skewed by London salaries, but we're looking at the £28,000 to £30,000 mark, dependent on where that is, experience level, with the average property price being around 270,000. Now that makes it a multiplier of over 8 times the average salary. Historically, it's a bit lower than that, but it's still very high, between 6 and 8%, hitting 8% right now. It's not actually the all-time high either. Over in America, the long-term average salary versus affordability or price is actually 5 times. At the moment, it's around 7 times. So that might not seem like a dramatic difference, 8 times your salary versus 7 times your salary, but that extra one part makes a dramatic difference. And if you think about that as a percentage, 1 in 8 versus 1 in 7, that's quite a lot more property that you're able to pay for in America versus the UK. The next thing to look at is land. So a lot of Americans look at us Brits over here and like, why don't you build your own house? Well, that's quite common in America for a middle-class family to get a bit of land, design the house and build it. I'm not saying every single person does it, but it's a lot more common. But the reason for that is land prices are dramatically cheaper because there's so much of it compared to the UK. So you'll look at these really beautiful homes in America where they have so much acreage with the land that's available. Here in the UK, you've got a little garden or a yard if you're watching this over in America. In the UK, land is really affordable if it's out in the sticks, in urban areas. But in an area where you can actually build on it, it's really scarce, it's really sparse, and so it actually costs a hell of a lot of money to buy land that you can actually build on. Especially if you were to build a detached property, you could spend hundreds of thousands, if not $500,000 upwards for the land itself. Naturally, that will dramatically impact it from a developer's point of view, because the more that they're paying per square meter for the land, the more property they need to get on it to make the venture more worthwhile, which naturally condenses and reduces the property sizes and increases the property prices to the end buyer. Next is material costs. Most American homes are timber built and timber framed as well. Whilst this is starting to come into the UK, it's still very much brick built properties. So it's durability versus speed, and there are pros and cons of both. Timber, very cheap over in America in comparison, and a lot cheaper over here, but we just don't build them that way. So how does that actually impact things? Well, with America, the houses are sorry Americans, lower quality in general unless you go very expensive. And so the good thing with that is it's higher turnaround. So flattening the house is easy enough, building a new one easy enough, quite quick, relatively cheap. Over here, we really sort of factor in durability, and so the cost per brick is going to be something like £1.50 to £2.50 each little brick, and imagine how many of those. The other thing is labor costs. Getting some wood up and the cladding is, again, hopefully this comes across in the right way, it's a lower skilled job than bricklaying. And so because it's a higher skilled job and you have to go through training, get qualifications over here, the cost per day is a lot higher for specialized labor compared to out in America. And so naturally, the cost of the entire build goes up massively. It also means that things are slower to change over here in the UK because of the durability. A lot of our properties, in fact, a lot of our properties are older than America itself. America was formed in, 1776? Sorry if I got that slightly wrong. A lot of our properties are way older than that here and still going strong. So naturally, there comes a cost to that quality and durability. The final thing to consider with these differences is the fire code violations that would be applicable in America because of the type of property versus here. So there's a lot of fire code violations in both and codes that we need to follow. But in America, because of, if you set that fire alight, which I'm not saying you would, then obviously if they were all connected, that would cause everything. And we've had issues like that in the past in the UK, but it's far less likely because of the brick build. And so out in America, even if you look at your average crescent, if you like, they're all likely to be detached properties. It's so common in America, even in some poorer areas. And it's hard for an American to understand this, but having a detached house in the UK, you are part of the middle class or affluent area. And that's a really big impact with the fire code violations. And finally, a big one is land conservation. I'm not completely sure out in America, but 93% of our land is urbanized. What I mean by that is in the UK, 7% of our land is used. Which I think is absolutely crazy. We've got around 1,000 towns and around 4,000 villages in the UK. So that's 5,000 sets of clusters, if you like. I'm gonna say that again. 1,000 towns and 4,000 villages for 67 million people, which means we have hugely concentrated areas. Even in our smallest villages, we'll have a few hundred people living in literally 2 minutes walk for the whole village. We've got this massive concentration. So 93% of our land is not used for building right now, with 14% being in greenbelt territory where we're not actually allowed to build on. So in the UK, we've got this massive ego, if you like, which I think is a really positive thing, to conserve the land that's around us, which doesn't seem to be followed in a lot of other areas in the world. So over in the UK, we're actually quite proud of this, but it really does get on developers' nerves when it's just outside of what we call brown belt or land that we can build on. And because it crosses a green belt, and it's only 14%, but it has a dramatic impact because it's deliberately placed green belt so you can't connect to the rest of the urbanized area, naturally restricting where we can build, which again contributes to smaller houses and more concentration on those areas for density population. So what does this mean for property in the UK? Well, because of the restricted space that we've got available, unfortunately, it's going to mean smaller and smaller houses for an ever increasing price. I'm sorry. But if you do want to increase your odds of getting into property and property investment, make sure to like the video, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.